Okay, good evening members and officers of the Council, and not forgetting members of the press and public. I welcome you to this meeting of the Council, Thursday 12th of July 2018. Housekeeping. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security doors to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the Green. Officers will assist you and advise you when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. The proceedings of this meeting will be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. I would advise that if filming takes place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured. I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Does anyone intend filming the meeting this evening? Thank you. Any member, therefore, in the public gallery who objects to the possibility of being filmed may wish to take this opportunity to leave the meeting. Any filming or recording will not be permitted for any item of business where exempt or confidential information is considered following the exclusion of the press and public from the meeting. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. So we now move on to the formal agendas, and agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. I have one apology in advance, and that's Councillor Wells, and we have received subsequent apologies from Councillor Larkins and Hillman. Are there any other apologies? Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rozecki is away on holiday.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 10th of May 2018. I move that the minutes of the annual meeting of the Council held on the 10th of May 2018 be approved and signed as a correct record. Would the Vice Chairman please second?
I second that, Chair.
Thank you. Do members agree? Thank you. Agenda item 3, announcements. And at this point, I'm going to ask for appreciation eventually, and this is a presentation of the past Chairman's badge. Would Councillor Falcon please make her way to the top of the table? Right, where's the badge? She's just gone to get it. Well rehearsed and well planned, we'll go and find the badge. Would you like to make your speech now? Depends on the quality of the speech.
Well, I did thank everybody for their support and everything, but I would just like to reiterate that it was a great privilege to represent Thanet everywhere we went, and to thank all the officers and everybody concerned for the advice and the support that they quite willingly and freely gave. And it was a great experience, and thank you very much.
Can I just add, whilst we find the badge, that the position involves a lot more than sitting at this point, this podium, pontificating on occasions. It does require some dedication. It does interfere, I know from personal experience, with your planned social life. You are on public scrutiny every time you wear this badge and you attend civic ceremonies all over the county, and I know from comments that I've received since I took appointment that Councillor Falcon did a superb job. Thank you.
Can I just add that if you're a female doing it, it gives you the perfect opportunity to buy lots of posh frocks.
You shouldn't have said that. Right, it gives me... I know. I know. You're not coming round any Sunday afternoons in the future. It gives me great pleasure to present you with the past chairman's badge. I am sure members would join me in thanking you for your work representing the council rather, as chairman. So if members would like to stand, I can then present the past chairman's badge.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you, and back to the agenda. And agenda item 4 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? Councillor Campbell.
I think agenda item 13 would capture us all, wouldn't it, Chair?
This is the allowances.
Allowances.
Yeah, as usual.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so there is a standard dispensation in place for consideration of members' allowances.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, petitions. One petition has been received in accordance with Council Procedure number 12. An e-petition containing 36 valid signatures has been received by the Council. I am therefore pleased to welcome Ms Clark to the meeting. Could you please make your way to the top table, Ms Clark? If she's not here, then I can't offer her 3 minutes to introduce the agenda. So therefore, I simply say, in accordance with the Council's petition scheme, the petition will be referred to Cabinet without debate for a report to the Council within 3 ordinary meetings. Thank you. Agenda item 6, questions from the press and public. 2 questions have been received from members of the public in accordance with Council Procedure number 13. Please note that only the questioner and respondent are permitted to speak on the question, and that if the questioner is not present at the meeting, their question cannot be put but will be replied to in writing. Could the questioner please only state the name of the Cabinet member to whom their question is to be put, and to read out the exact wording of the question that they have submitted to the Council. Agenda item 6A, question number 1 from a member of the public regarding clinical waste. I'm pleased to welcome Mr Norwood to the meeting. Could you please make your way to the top table?
Okay, this question is for Councillor Taylor-Smith. Could you please tell me why the clinical waste collection has deteriorated? Collections that used to take 2 weeks now take 3 to 6. The explanation that I was given, that it was due to an increased number of users, seems barely credible.
Thank you, Mr Norwood. I call upon Councillor Taylor-Smith to respond.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Thank you for your question, Mr Norwood. I should first like to reassure you that there has been no general deterioration of Thanet District Council's overall clinical waste service. We currently have over 4,000 registered users who regularly use our clinical waste collection service, but we have seen a significant increase in requests for sharps collections recently. As a result of this increase in demand, some users have had to wait a little longer for sharps box removals, as all of these box removals have to be collected in a controlled way across the District Council area, and this collection service is programmed on specific days, as you probably know. I can now confirm that the Sharps Clinical Waste Collection Service has caught up with a slight delay, and we are now taking bookings for 1 week in advance, which is the normal service delivery time. Mr Norwood, please let me reassure you and all other clinical waste service users that Thanet District Council is committed to maintaining customer satisfaction for this very important service. If in future demand for this service rises, we actually do have enough capacity and flexibility to add an extra collection day if necessary. And for your information, we're currently carrying out a benchmarking exercise looking at other authorities around the country and are going to be reviewing the options that we have been finding out about. So there will be more information to come in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor-Smith, and thank you, Mr Norwood. Agenda item 6B, question number 2 from a member of the public regarding the local plan. Would members please refer to supplementary agenda number 1? I'm pleased to welcome Mr Rate to the meeting. Could you please make your way to the top table?
Good evening. My question is for Councillor Bob Bayford, the Leader of the Council. Please could you outline the potential risks to Thanet taxpayers if the local plan is found unsound? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Rate. I call upon the Leader to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr Rate, for your question. If the local plan were to be found not sound, then that would actually create delay in producing a local plan. And a significant delay could result in further intervention by the Minister. The cost of any external work resulting from intervention would have to be borne by the Council. Even if there were no intervention, there would still be significant costs to the Council in reviewing and updating the evidence base. This could quite easily cost several tens of thousands of pounds. All the time there is no adopted local plan, there is a significant risk that the Council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. If this occurs, the Council would lose the ability to refuse housing applications in undesirable locations, or could face an increased risk of losing planning appeals and consequently a greater risk of costs being granted against the Council. It is also likely that the Council would have to plan for the higher number of homes expected under the Government's new housing methodology. And with less control over new development, there's a greater risk that development will take place on more unplanned basis. Allied to this, there is a significant risk to the provision of key infrastructure to support development, roads, schools, health facilities, etc. Also, new policies relating to local green space, energy and water efficiency and internal space standards could not be applied. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Mr Rate. Agenda item 7, questions from members of the Council. One question has been received from members. So agenda item 7A, question number 1 from a member regarding housing. Would members please refer to supplementary agenda number 1? I call upon Councillor Constantine.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I just preface this question by reminding the Chamber that currently in the UK there are 4.1 million children living in poverty, and that since 2010 progress on social mobility has gone into reverse. You will recall that Thanet has the highest child poverty rates in Kent and in the South East, and that's what drives this question. So my question, which is to Councillor Leslie Game, can you tell me how the Conservatives are planning to manage our current housing crisis? How many families with children are impacted by the need to move into temporary accommodation? What are you planning to do to curb and manage the costs associated with providing temporary accommodation for these families and children?
Thank you, Councillor Constantine, and members will note that that was originally meant for the Leader, but with consent it is now going to be responded by the portfolio holder, so I now call upon Councillor Gain to respond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Constantine, for your question. Homelessness is a national crisis, not just a crisis in Thanet, a national crisis. the Local Government Association have reported that there are 120,540 children living in temporary accommodation with their families that has been provided by local authorities throughout the country. This represents a 37% increase since 2014. This crisis has been driven by a severe shortage of affordable homes to rent and the increasing cost of the private rented sector. Research published by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation in 2017 showed that 3.4 million households, 40% of renters in England, are spending more than a third of income on their rent. This has risen from 32%, 2.7 million households in 2005/6. The introduction of the Homeless Reduction Act in 2017 does refocus the work of local councils on homelessness prevention, but will not in itself resolve the shortage of suitable, affordable accommodation. This national picture is reflected locally. The Council currently, as at Monday 9th of July 2018, has 168 households placed in temporary accommodation. We have been working hard to ensure that households in temporary accommodation are moved on as quickly as possible and to improve the quality of temporary accommodation provided. This represents a slight reduction from the position at the beginning of the year, and further reductions are projected for the remainder of the year. Of this number, 71 households are families with children, all of whom have self-contained accommodation, including 11 families in council-owned flats or houses. There are currently no families with children in temporary hotel accommodation. Overall, the Council's use of hotel accommodation has significantly reduced since January, down from 51 households at the start of the year to 26 households by the 30th of June. The Council continues to invest in building new homes, investing £30 million to deliver 150 new homes by 2020. We expect to complete 20 homes during the current financial year, and construction is progressing well, with a further 49 homes due to start over the same period. We have additionally set aside £1.6 million for new temporary accommodation to help reduce the overall cost of homelessness to the Council, and are currently looking for a suitable site to develop. Since the implementation of the Homelessness Reduction Act, on 3rd of April, the Council has supported 187 households with a personal housing plan and successfully prevented 92 households from becoming homeless in the first place. We have enhanced our housing options team to provide these services and improve the effectiveness of homelessness prevention. We have set aside funding in the current year for homelessness and have launched a new incentive scheme, the Landlord Incentive Scheme, to encourage private sector landlords to make homes available for households in need. Since April, we have provided financial assistance to 42 households to help them access a private sector home. The work that has been completed to prevent homelessness, construct new homes and support people living in temporary accommodation has both improved the outcomes for homeless people and reduced the cost of homelessness for the Council.
Thank you, Councillor Gay. Councillor Constantine, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, thank you, Chair. I'm glad to hear there's some progress, but however, you say the situation is improving, and yet the cost of providing temporary accommodation has climbed a very steep curve since 2010 from about £50,000 to now about £1.2 million. So that would kind of indicate that we do indeed have a crisis. I think 71 households with children homeless in Thanet is 71 families with children too many, frankly. I'm getting to it. I've got a question. I'm getting to it. Shall I do it now? Yes. Thank you.
Please.
Can you comment on whether you think it's actually time to look again at the local plan, using the matter of the urgent need for social homes, of which Stonehill Park have promised 400 plus, as the key imperative? I believe this is what our residents want, and I believe that's our job as councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Considine. Not exactly a question, preamble, but I'm quite lenient on those things. Would you like to respond, Councillor Game?
Thank you. The issue of the local plan is something that is still being worked on, as you know. What I would like to suggest to you, actually, is we are all aware that homelessness is a great issue, and I'd like to arrange a meeting for you to come and meet the head of housing and the housing options manager, so we can talk through ideas and see what we can all do to help this situation.
Thank you, Councillor Game. Agenda item 8, motions of notice. No motions on notice have been received in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 3, so we can move swiftly on to agenda item 9, Leader's Report. I call upon the Leader.
Thank you, Chairman. My Leader's Report is a factual account of things that have happened or been announced since my last report, which in this case was April. And I've been asked to acknowledge that some of the things that get reported in this are in fact as a result of initiatives begun by the previous UKIP administration, and I'm happy to do that. But equally, I must point out that most of the issues we're presently addressing predate this administration coming in. I've spoken before of this administration's intention to continue to use its enforcement powers to create a better environment. As part of a clampdown, Thanet District Council issued 1,071 fixed penalty notices for littering, spitting and dogfouling offences in the 6 months to May. These FPNs are a sign of the Council's zero-tolerance approach. We are also determined to push for further penalties in the event of non-payment of the fixed penalties. As such, at Canterbury Magistrates Court on the 1st of May, 13 defendants were ordered to pay a total of £4,518 for littering offences. And in the past 2 months, 3 Thanet residents were successfully prosecuted for fly tipping. By taking these court actions, this council continues to demonstrate that it will not tolerate fly tipping or the dropping of litter and will pursue anyone who flouts the law. I can also announce that we will shortly be launching a new anti-litter campaign, working in partnership with local people, where the focus will be on taking a harder line than those that blight our district. In recent weeks, we've seen a successful prosecution of 6 rogue landlords for housing-related offences. This resulted in over £32,000 in fines, sending out a clear message that we will not tolerate landlords who operate unsafe and illegal properties, making tenants' life a misery. In June, TDC raised awareness of the Alcohol Control Public Space Protection Order by targeting alcohol-related antisocial behaviour. This led to 24 formal warnings being given, 29 people surrendered alcohol to officers, 6 young people were dealt with under different powers, and 1 fixed penalty notice was served. We've also opened our new state-of-the-art CCTV control room. The whole network of cameras are now high definition, with images being sent via Wi-Fi, resulting in excellent quality, helping to keep the area safer and giving a better chance of catching offenders. I'm also pleased to report the start of a programme of investment in smart bins to improve our service. These indicate when they are nearly full, so they can be emptied before they become full, thus avoiding the problem of overflowing and the resultant mess that's caused. As far as asset management is concerned, I'm pleased to note that we've successfully sold the Fort Road Hotel at auction for £360,000. The building has had a chequered history since we acquired it, and I look forward to seeing the new owner's plans for the building. Cabinet on the 14th of June approved a number of disposals, including the transfer of Birchington Memorial Ground and land at Alpha Road, known as Dog Acre, to Birchington Parish Council, thus confirming our intention to work more closely with town and parish councils in a move that will ensure local control of these assets for the benefit of the local community. Cabinet also approved the transfer of the old lookout at Broadstairs to community management, thus securing the future of this important asset. In other property matters, it's also good to see action on the ground at the Pleasurama site. Whilst at the moment this is limited to site clearance and tidying, it does show progress by the new owners in restarting the development on this prime site. Last week, I had the privilege to be at Dreamland for the unveiling by Margate Estates of their plans for an exciting new hotel on Margate seafront, which is further testament to the town's resurgence, attracting visitors from far and wide. And indeed, across the district, we've seen a 19% increase in our visitor economy, and there is evidence of unfulfilled demand for additional bed space for those now looking to extend their stays in Thanet. The winter shelter statistics were published in May, and this follows its successful second year of operation. It was found that there were 16 fewer people living on our streets, and 35 vulnerable people were supported over the winter months. Of these, 25 are now being helped to a life off the streets, 33 received medical consultations, 12 had structured mental health assessments, 3 are in training, and 2 have actually found employment. And that's a tremendous outcome. And huge thanks are due to the 107 volunteers who donated a staggering 4,560 hours to the project. Against this backdrop, it is welcome news that the government has announced its intention to halve the number of rough sleepers by 2022 and to eliminate the problem completely by 2027. As a first step, they are making £30 million of funding available to start tackling the issue. Thanet Council's housing department submitted a bid for £388,000 for projects to reduce rough sleeping, and I'm very pleased to report we're allocated £367,000. Following other recent awards, I'm also pleased to report that the housing team achieved highly commended for 2 of our shortlisted entries as part of the 2018 National Municipal Journal Awards. I feel at this time it's probably important to update members on the situation regarding travellers. Kent as a whole has seen an increase in the number of traveller incursions over the last 12 months, and this has been reflected in the numbers we have seen in Thanet. It's important to remember that gypsies and travellers are protected from discrimination by the Equality Act 2010, which means they cannot and should not be persecuted just because of their lifestyle, culture or origin. However, that does not mean they can break the law, and as such, TDC has taken action against a number of incursions, including where appropriate, moving them from council land. I appreciate there's been some frustration expressed by the public, but the council has to follow the proper process in dealing with incursions, and this takes time. It doesn't mean the council is not being effective or not taking the matter seriously. We are looking for solutions to make unauthorised access to land at Jackie Baker's more difficult, and whilst I welcome the ideas that some members of the community have put forward, the council is required to go through formal processes, so it's not just as straightforward as digging a ditch or putting up a fence. We are currently undertaking the process of assessing a number of options, and I will inform local residents once we have decided on the most suitable course of action, and I expect that announcement to be very soon. On the 30th of April, our new website was launched and has already seen 82,000 visits. Feedback has been positive, and when tested by the Society of Information Technology Management for usability and ease of finding information, they gave it the maximum rating of 4 stars. Not only that, we've been listed as one of their recommended websites for best practice. I think that's a first for Thanet. Well, with regard to the Thames Estuary 2050 Growth Commission, TDC contributed to a call for ideas back in September 2016, since when the Commission has been reviewing over 1,000 contributions it received. It's now launched its conclusions in its 2050 vision. By 2050, the Thames Estuary will be a tapestry of productive places along a global river. The estuary will create 1.3 million new jobs and generate 190 billion of additional GVA and at least 1 million I looked up what GVA meant earlier and I've forgotten. Gross value added. I'm sure you were all desperate to know that GVO stands for gross value added. It's going to add £190 billion worth of that. Okay, and at least 1 million new homes will be delivered. The report identifies key areas along the River Thames from London to Thanet and Southend. Thanet, along with Canterbury, Swale and Medway, will be part of the North Kent Foreshore, where proposals include establishing a North Kent Foreshore Fund, the improvement of education attainment and skills acquisition, thus creating clear pathways to employment, and the creation of a health supercentre. TDC is currently considering the detailed content of the report with a view on how it might want to engage and contribute to these proposals. It was announced in May that the 2019 Turner Prize will be hosted by Turner Contemporary, and TDC are already working with Turner Contemporary in early discussions about how we can all make the most of the opportunities that hosting the Turner Prize will bring. It's expected that between September and December 2019, there will be an additional 300,000 visitors to the exhibition of the work of the shortlisted artists. This will further raise Margate's profile both nationally and internationally. It is really a highly prestigious international award, and it's really good that it's coming to town. Finally, as part of their member training and development programme, Democratic Services are starting a process of encouraging more candidates to stand as councillors in 2019. This will involve public sessions at the council and further outreach sessions so that we can explain the role of a councillor, what training and development new councillors can expect, what allowances are provided, particularly for those with caring responsibilities, and the support and help they would get from the Democratic support team. I believe that this is a welcome initiative which may lead people coming forward who might otherwise have been afraid of the unknown. And we all know they should be afraid, very afraid.
Thank you, Leader. In the absence of Councillor Wells, I call upon Councillor Lynn Fairbrass to comment on or ask questions in relationship to the Leader's report. Councillor Fairbrass.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Councillor Bayford for his reports this evening and his acknowledgement of his inheritance of successful actions and projects from the UKIP administration that preceded him. He could have added the relative financial stability of this council to his list, which was probably the starkest difference in inheritance between 2015 and 2018. However, much of what he has said is underpinned by a common sense and good housekeeping approach, and that in itself is welcome in looking after the longer-term concerns and futures of our residents. I also would like to note that he avoids all mention of the local plan, which dominates all other issues at the moment, and avoids acknowledging much of the simple good advice he sat and heard from members of the previous administration just 24 hours ago. He needs now to ponder carefully what local plan options come forward to Council, because what is currently proposed lacks the long-term beneficial common sense he seems to so admire in other areas of this Council's business. He has less than a year as leader to prove he has the capacity to steer this Council prudently for the future, or he will be handing on the sort of mess we inherited in 2015, because on the big issues he cannot deliver reality over unsubstantiated dream. In 2014, this council was branded toxic and dysfunctional by peer review, mainly because councillors could not and would not accept sound legal advice. I hope and trust Councillor Bayford is not leading us back there on the big issues. That indeed would be troubling and damaging when compared to his inheritance of an award-winning and financially stable organisation. I would also like to mention and welcome the recent decision to implement a new landlord incentive scheme. I know that the team have been working on this for a very long period of time in order to assist, alongside the Help to Move scheme, the growing number of households facing homelessness in Thanet to secure private rented accommodation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fairbrass. Does the Leader wish to respond?
Well, I need to thank Councillor Fairbrass for some of her comments, and just to sort of really point out that I thought the idea was to ask questions about what I'd said, and to comment, which didn't really seem to do, but well done all the same.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Reverend Piper to comment on or ask questions in relationship to the Leader's report, and I'm sure there's one or two questions coming up. Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Leader, for your efforts, particularly the time you have actually spent communicating with other groups about your activities and your aspirations moving forward, notably communicating your efforts to secure a local plan that a majority of members can support next week. Remains to be seen, of course, whether the Council will support the proposal, but no doubt many are hopeful that the changes being suggested and the departure from the January the 18th draft will show that the decision to vote, as some of us did that night, was the right one in the circumstances. I would like to join you in congratulating the housing team on another fine recognition for their work. Much of your report, as you say, is factual, and my time is short, so I hope you will not mind if I focus my response on one particular key area of concern. The recent traveller incursions have shown gaping great big holes in our preparedness and our capability of prevention. I am much more familiar with the situation at Jackie Baker's than I am with Dane Valley, but I know that Councillor Gary Taylor shares many of the same concerns. I'd like to give members some more details, the kind of information that they may not otherwise hear about. Regarding Jackie Bakers, the number of unlawful break-ins with associated criminal damage is on the rise. The amount of rubbish, including human excrement and fly tipping, is disgraceful. Recently, they stole a full gas cylinder and even the door from a local fast food outlet in Northwood and took it to Jackie Bakers. Not only did they dangerously leave the empty cylinder behind, but the original owner has suffered considerable financial loss. Many residents are in regular contact with me seeking firm responses to definitive action to make this area more secure. Leader, I have had conversations with and shared emails with officers, and the Chief Executive Officer came for a walk about the site just a couple of weeks ago. We have, in the last year, been offered useful help and advice from, among others, Mr. Bruce Grant, for the construction of a significant bund, and we have discussed kissing gates to prevent incursions by locals on motorbikes and all-terrain vehicles. The travellers, plus these recalcitrant locals, are a blight on the rest of the community, and they simply must be stopped. Many of the comments I get, Leader, are that the rights and privileges of the travellers seem to be given far more attention than the rights of residents. Sadly, it isn't really too difficult to see why people would come to that conclusion. It may not be right, but it's not too difficult to see how they think that, they might think that. Leader, there simply isn't enough effort being made to stop these motorcycles abusing the park. Many of the riders have no registration plates and yet ride on the public road to get to the park. We are concerned, Leader, and we would ask if there can be more work done about the lack of grass cutting, because the seeds on the type of grass that is growing on Jackie Bakers is often dangerous to dogs. And I know of one resident whose dog has died as a result of grass seed complications. Please, then, can we have a confirmation of serious action to be taken to secure and regularly maintain the area of Jackie Bakers as you have indicated in your report? Thank you, Chair.
Leaders to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, Councillor Piper, I mean, we talked about this, I mean, and as I said in my report, it is something that we take very seriously. I think this year has been exceptional. I've not been aware of the number of incursions as we've experienced this year, and it does seem as though in certain places some of the behaviour has been beyond the pale. We understand that completely, understand that residents nearby are very upset about it. I can only reassure you, or hope to reassure you, that as I said in my report, we are looking at this. I expect to come forward with some proposals for Jackie Bakers very soon, and we are looking at other actions that we can take. I'd also point out as well, of course, that a lot of the behaviour should be reported to the police, and it's them that should be dealing with it. As far as the grass cutting is concerned, I'll take your comments back to the relevant service. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I call upon Councillor Matterface to comment on or ask questions in relationship to the Leader's report. Councillor Matterface.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not mentioning the local plan, you might be pleased, but I do have some points to raise and I've got some questions for the Leader. You said they're taking a harder line with those who drop litter. Does that include the bin men, about whom I get endless complaints because they don't pick up after themselves? I direct that question to the gentleman sitting behind you as well. With regard to the CCTV, I'm glad this has been kept locally and is now functioning, as knowledge of the local area is obviously crucial. But I would like to ask, how many smart bins have we actually got, and where have they been located, please? So I'll take a written answer later, don't worry. Where ordinary bins... If you got the answer, that's fine. A live answer. Live, yeah.
In marine gardens.
Right.
Too high for people to use.
Thank you. Where ordinary bins are located, they need emptying more often. This is becoming an increasing problem. We're encouraging residents and visitors to use them, but it's very frustrating when they aren't emptied often enough, especially in our public parks and especially in my local park, St Peter's Recreation Ground. Every day I get complaints about the fact the bins haven't been emptied. People are using them, but unfortunately, if they're only emptied once or twice a week, it is insufficient. Could you please tell me how many road sweepers with brooms we now have? Because I get various figures. I would like to know. There is a reason for asking the question, by the way. This morning on Beacon Road, I saw the Mini Scarab shooting down there, which was a very, very welcome sight. But unfortunately, it is used on roads that are so parked up, it just goes down the middle at 30 miles an hour and doesn't pick up anything at all. We do need people out there, particularly in heavily parked up roads, people with brooms and litter picks. I've done umpteen litter picks, and I know other people do, and we know it is an increasing problem, but we need some kind of action. Maybe an education program. I don't know what the answer is, but we need to start doing something. Now, regard to winter shelter, I was one of the 107 volunteers you've just thanked, and I've already signed up for this year. And I'm very glad that an organiser is already in place this month, because last year there were a few admin issues, people who volunteered who were not contacted. So hopefully with the work with the Salvation Army and with housing, we can make sure that that is covered. I think it's important to appreciate that all those who are sleeping rough do have a story to tell, and we should realise that at any one point anybody could become homeless. One of the things I learned in the winter shelter was some of the stories which were tragic. Some of them were just bad luck, some of them were down to drink, some of them down to drugs, but everybody had a story to tell. And what does concern me particularly is to see the number of women who are now sleeping rough, because they are exceptionally vulnerable. All rough sleepers are vulnerable, but women are particularly vulnerable. With regard to the money, it's great to hear that, but I hope it won't just be used for staff, because I hope some of it will filter through to the various agencies that do help rough sleepers, like the GAP project. So, Councillor Bayford, I would like to invite you to join me on a Tuesday afternoon at the GAP project in Broadstairs between 2 and 4. And you will be able to meet the rough sleepers, the volunteers, the staff and agency workers there, including Porchlight and Turning Point. The Chief Executive and I had a very interesting afternoon there, and her visit was much appreciated. I'm also very concerned, has been raised by Councillor Constantine, the number of families becoming homeless. All of us have dealings with people whose lives are just turned upside down, often through no fault of their own. Many have employment here. I've dealt with people who said, how am I going to get to work if I move to Medway? I've got children in secondary school doing exams, and I think this is the family is unstable enough, and being moved out of area creates even greater instability when they have a journey to make. I know it uses up enormous amounts of officer time, and homelessness is a threat to families because they become extremely anxious, they become worried, and the children are concerned about their educational standards. So I would like to ask, this is a question, what's being done to get more funding to increase the supply of social housing? I'm very pleased that in my ward, the houses that are being built are almost completed, and also I'd like to say that the contractor, I've said this to Mr. Porter, the contractor has engaged with all the residents, kept them fully updated on what is happening. I would like you also possibly to investigate the house in a box scheme. A house can be built in 2 to 3 weeks at a cost of £50,000. We have to supply the land, but there is funding, and it's a bit like a posh prefab. If those of us old enough to remember prefabs can remember what they were like. I would also like to add my congrats, I've got 2 sentences, to the excellent housing team who are always helpful and definitely go above and beyond. The event for potential councillors is to be very welcomed, as it's cross-party and it's using experienced councillors like myself in addition to officers. And the members' training group, of which Councillor Taylor-Smith and others sitting here are members, have done sterling work in all that we've been presented with, and we have been aided by Democratic Services, whom I have to thank for their patience and good-natured approach and tolerance when we ask them really difficult questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matterface, and I can let you know that Councillor Maeve Saunders and I met the new lady road sweeper in Broadstairs this morning, and she had a brush in her hand, not a picker. Leader to respond.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Matterface. The hard fact questions that you've asked, I will get a written answer to for you. You raised the point of women rough sleepers. As I understand it, the national average is about 10%. In Thanet, it's 25%. They do have special vulnerabilities. And I'm sure you'll be pleased to know that part of the money from government is going to be spent on a hostel specifically for women rough sleepers. So I think that's quite good news. Happy to accept your offer to go to the GAP project. We'll do that. And I've been reliably informed by my colleague to my left that we are actually investigating the house in a box scheme. So we're ahead of you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader.
We'll add that to the other answers.
Thank you. Agenda item 10, changes committees, panels and boards for the year 2018-19 based on proportionality. Would members please note that there is a typographical error in the table for option 1 at paragraph 2.9 of the report. The table should show that the Labour group have 1 member on the licensing board. I call upon the Leader to make a proposal in respect of the options as outlined in the report. Leader.
Propose option 1, Chair.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Fairbrass. Does any member wish to propose an alternative option? In that case, can I ask, do members agree? Thank you. Nomination of members to serve on committees. Group leaders may wish to take this opportunity to advise of changes to their nominations to committees, panels and boards for the remainder of 2017-18. Councillor Bayford, do you wish to advise of any nomination changes?
I think we're required to nominate a new member for licensing, and that will be Councillor Banbridge. I would also like to take this opportunity to nominate planning substitutes. Councillor Maeve Saunders, Councillor Banbridge, Councillor Dexter and Councillor Taylor-Smith. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fairbrass, do you wish to advise of any nomination changes?
I have already advised, Chair, so we have that.
Thank you. And Councillor Reverend Piper-Smith, do you wish to advise of any nomination changes?
Thank you, Chair. The seat we would lose on licensing would be the seat that was held by the late Alan Howes. So the current licensing group for our group would be Councillor Linda Potts, Councillor Roy Potts and Councillor John Dennis. And the other change to planning, we're going to ask Councillor Trevor Shonk to step aside. So our planning members would be Councillor John Buckley, Councillor Robin Edwards and Councillor Gary Taylor. Mr. Chairman, can I also take this opportunity to inform Council that with the departure of Councillor Suzanne Brim, we as a group have appointed Councillor Robin Edwards to sit as our opposition spokesperson for operational services, shadowing Councillor Taylor-Smith. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Piper. Councillor Matterface.
We have no changes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 11, changes to the Council's constitution. I move that the recommendation as set out in the report be adopted. Would the Vice Chairman please second?
Second that, Chair.
Do members agree? One hand's gone up. Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a question, if I may, about the proposed report and the Constitution. Under 5.2, it states that the overview and it states that overview and scrutiny are no longer allowed to create working parties. I wondered why that was, especially when in 9.1 it talks about the Constitutional Review Working Party.
Thank you, Councillor Messenger. Monitoring Officer to respond.
Yes, the reason for the reduction in working parties is because the workload has effectively increased by doubling the number of panels, and obviously the staff hasn't changed, so we have limited capacity to manage those. So instead of having working parties, the work will be divided up between the 2 panels instead.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor. Thank you. Agenda item 12 is calendar of council meetings for 2018-19. I move that the recommendation as set out in the report be adopted. Would the Vice Chairman please second?
Second that, Chair.
Do members agree? Thank you. Apologies for the rustling of paper. Agenda item 13, Members' Allowances Scheme 2018-19. I call upon the leader.
Move the recommendation as printed, Chair.
Is there a seconder?
Seconded, Chairman.
Do members agree? Thank you. Agenda item 14, nominations to non-executive outside bodies. Once again, I call upon the leader.
Thank you, Chair. Members can see the list. There are still a number of vacancies, and if there are any members who tonight wish to volunteer to fill those vacancies, we could take them. Councillor Matterface.
Thank you for flashing green at me. I'd like to nominate Councillor Constantine for the Thanet Volunteer Bureau and the Youth Advisory Group, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. Any other nominations? Okay, in that case, those two nominations and the list is printed. I so move, Chair.
We've had a seconder.
Seconded, Chair.
Do members now agree? Thank you. Agenda item 15, standards hearing decision. Councillor Brim. I call upon the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chairman. Rather sadly, to some extent, this report relates to a further breach of the Councillor's Code of Conduct by Councillor Suzanne Brim. The last breach from her came to the Council on the 22nd of February this year, less than 5 months ago, and you may recall that the breach of the Code then related to a comment from Councillor Brim about a council officer on her Facebook page. That breach resulted in a vote of censure from the Council. In this latest case, Councillor Brim published an officer's ex-directory personal telephone number on Facebook and invited those reading her Facebook page to call her. I'm sure she will be glad to hear from you. I read out in February, and I'll read out again what the Protocol and Member-Officer Relations says. It says that members should be aware that officers are constrained in the response they may make to public comments from members. Members should not criticise officers personally, in public or through the press, nor seek to undermine their position by abuse, rudeness or ridicule. To continue to make public comments about officers, knowing that they are constrained in their ability to reply, is, in my view as monitoring officer, a cowardly and despicable act. It was an immature thing to do and reflects poorly on a councillor who is meant to be leading and setting an example to her community. However, Councillor Brim says she thought she was doing nothing wrong. She showed no remorse and she offered no apology. Councillor Brim was requested to remove the offending comments, but she did not do so. Councillor Brim also showed a complete disregard and lack of respect for the standards process. She refused to engage in the complaints process. She did not engage with the investigator, and nor did she attend the final hearing. Councillor Brim was in any event found to be in breach of the following provisions of the Code of Conduct: attempting to intimidate an officer, attempting to bully an officer, disclosing information which was of a confidential nature, and bringing her office into disrepute. Councillor Brim's conduct reflects badly on the reputation of the Council generally, and also is very costly. Each investigation costs the Council about £4,000, and that doesn't include officer and member time. And the costs of investigations into Councillor Brim this year amount to some £8,000. It doesn't need to be this way. Complying with the Council's Code of Conduct is not difficult, and it's something that members achieve with very little effort generally, simply by following the ordinary standards of behaviour which we all follow in our daily lives. Councillor Brim, on the other hand, has great difficulty in following these simple rules. Attempts have been made to educate Councillor Brim. She has been advised where she will find advice on how people should behave, and has been offered individual training which she has refused. As the Council's monitoring officer, I think that Councillor Brim needs to think about her role as a councillor and her inability to follow these simple rules of conduct. If she is incapable of following these simple rules, I would ask her to seriously consider whether she is suited to a role in public life. The independent person appointed by the Council who advises members and the Standards Committee said, "Unfortunately, Councillor Brim is only too familiar with the limitations of sanctions that are currently available to the Standards Committee and the officers of the Council. In the past, the committee have imposed sanctions on Councillor Brim, advised her and offered guidance and training. Nothing has seemed to change her opinions or attitude. If Councillor Brim won't take notice of the Standards Committee and change her behaviour, or take notice of me as monitoring officer and to alter her behaviour, or take notice of her fellow councillors when they pass a vote of censure to modify her behaviour, I would make a plea, and I'd make a plea, had she been here, a plea to Councillor Brim that could she just please just take notice of the phrase that she has right at the top of her Facebook page, where she says, "Just be nice to one another, it's not difficult." If she followed her own advice, she would not be the subject of complaints and at the same time would save the Council a substantial sum of money. In the meantime, I invite Council to censure Councillor Brim for her behaviour in posting the private home telephone number of a Council officer on Facebook.
Thank you. I therefore propose that the Council censures Councillor Brim for her behaviour in posting the private home telephone number of a Council officer on Facebook, which resulted in Councillor Brim breaching the following provisions of the Code of Conduct. And the monitoring officer has already outlined. They are: A, attempting to intimidate an officer; B, attempting to bully an officer; C, disclosing information which was of a confidential nature; and D, bringing her office into disrepute. Would the Vice Chairman please second?
Second that, Chair.
Do members agree? Agree. Councillor Hayton.
Thank you very much, Chair. Could you elaborate on how long
Microphone, Councillor Hayton.
Oh, sorry.
Could you tell me how long Councillor Brim has to be vacant from this Council meetings before the 6 months is up and she has to be banned from being a councillor after 6 months? Thank you.
She has to attend a meeting of which she is a member, so last night wouldn't have counted. But to be honest, I haven't checked when she last attended a meeting in her own right. But you're right, it is 6 months. If it's more than 6 months without attending a meeting, then she is disqualified.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to comment or debate? I've had agreement from all councillors. So that's thank you. And that concludes the business of this meeting of the Council. I look forward to seeing you all this time, or 7 o'clock next Thursday, when I think we'll have an equally interesting meeting. Thank you.